I think one of the biggest things I've learned about marketing in general, whether you're selling software or a movie or a toy or a tractor trailer, is repeating the message. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's more a matter of getting that same message out there in multiple forms. Because as you and I both know, being product marketers, your audience doesn't hear you the first time or even the second time. They need to hear that message over and over again.
You are listening to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, the product marketing community that gives back. I'm your host, Louise Liu. In this episode, SJ Petteruti, Principal Go-to-Market Strategist at Salsify, shares his experience in developing product messaging. Let's dive into it right now. So, welcome to the show, SJ. So excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Louise. I'm really glad to be here as well.
Great. So from a Disney show writer to now you're a tech marketer, this is a very interesting journey. So how did you get into product marketing?
It's a good question. I started getting into product marketing actually after I was a product manager and before I knew that product marketing was even a function in a tech business. So I had worked as a Disney show writer for a couple of years and had found that I really didn't enjoy the professional screenwriting world. It was not as creative as I thought it would be. It was not as lucrative as I thought it would be. It was very unstable. And so when I was thinking about making a career change, I thought I'd like to go into something that will have a certain amount of insulation from future market dynamics, and technology certainly seemed to be something that there was always going to be demand for, at least for the entirety of my career. And so I found a job and initially was working as just as a copywriter and thought that being in product management was the place to be. I wanted to help develop the actual products and the actual technology that I was writing for. And very quickly realized that being a product manager is a very technical position. You really need to be able to have an attention to detail and a communication style that works well with data engineers and data-driven minded people. And that's not really me. I'm more of a creative. I started as a show writer, so once I learned that there was this function called product marketing, I thought, oh, this is the perfect combination of what I'm looking for. It's more strategic than just doing the regular content writing. It's not as technical and detail oriented as being a product manager. And it really combined the skills that I have and the things that I love to do around creating a story, telling something that has meaning to an audience, and bringing that message in all of the different ways that an audience wants to receive it. So I've been in product marketing now for probably 7 or 8 years and have specifically been focusing on retail software and product data management software for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been incredibly fulfilling for me. I'm very happy about the road that I've taken and the point that it's led me to.
It's great that you found your love for product marketing. Yes.
It always happens in ways that you don't expect it. You look back and it seems very logical to you, but as you're going through it, you're usually feeling very lost. But no, I'm glad I landed here.
Great. So now you're currently working as a go-to-market strategist at Salsify. So can you tell us a little bit more about your role?
Yeah. So at Salsify, so we're a product data management software solution. And we offer solutions for both brand manufacturers and retailers. And product data these days is a very, very fast growing segment of the retail industry. There is more product data that's being required than ever before, and there's more places that data is showing up than ever before. You think about the fact that you've got opportunities to buy products now on Facebook, on Snapchat, on TikTok, and those destinations are only a small fraction of all of the other places that product data needs to show up when you start to think about retail websites and marketplaces like Amazon Marketplace or eBay, and even newer channels like customer service softwares that need to be able to reference up-to-date product information. So we sell a solution that allows brands and retailers to organize that data and then syndicate that data everywhere it needs to go. And I like to say that I'm the voice of the company. So I help to curate what our company level and high level message should be. I develop the pitch decks. I develop the talking points. I work with our designers on the website I oversee the content development for all of the different solutions that we offer on both the brand manufacturer and the retailer side of things. And so in general, I work very closely with our content development team and with our corporate marketing team to make sure that the product related messaging and the company related messaging is in line with our overall brand. And then I work with the different marketing channels to bring that message to life.
Great. Certainly. And then developing product messaging is essentially one of the most critical responsibilities of product marketers. And then, so in your own words, what is product messaging?
So I think that the way to think about, product messaging, and I think one of the key things that defines a product marketer from a product manager is that a product manager will be able to tell you all of the specific details around the functionality of the product itself and how it works and why it was built this way and where you need to go to make sure that you're taking advantage of its full capabilities. But very rarely does the market, the audience that we are advertising to and that we're communicating to, very rarely do they need to know that level of detail. And very rarely do they think about a product from the perspective of how the product works. What they are always thinking about is, what is the problem that I have and what is the right solution to solve that problem? And so they're coming to the conversation from an opposite perspective of where a lot of product managers sit and think. Product managers need to be thinking from a product perspective. They need to understand how this functionality works in relation to how the product has already been designed. But oftentimes the market that you're talking to, a new customer, a new prospect, they're going to be talking and thinking about things from the perspective of their problem. And they might not have any clue about how the product actually works. And so when we as product marketers think about developing our message, we need to be thinking about it from the perspective of the audience. And that usually means telling the story from a business standpoint and not from a product functionality standpoint. So all of our messaging and the way that we organize our solution information is all around the business challenges that the features and the products are built to solve. And that's where we begin our storytelling so that we can relate and connect with the audience immediately. We can earn trust by identifying the fact that we understand their problem, and we can advise not from a selling standpoint, but from a consultative standpoint on what you would need to do strategically or functionally in order to overcome that business objective. And if we tell all of that story correctly, then the customer should recognize that we have the solution that we need before they even get to understanding what the solution can actually do.
Yeah, this is great. So do you have a repeatable process you like to use for developing product messaging? Can you share with us?
Yeah, so the way that we usually design our product information internally is we've created a template that stores all of the key components for a particular product or a specific feature that we want to build messaging around. And that document serves as the source of record for all of the different manifestations of where that messaging might end up. So if a website designer is designing a web page for a new feature, or they're adding a section to a website, or a content marketer wants to write a blog article about a new feature that we just released, or we've got a new piece of collateral that the sales team is requesting that has a combination of different features that they want to describe in one document. All of those different people who are working to build those resources can consult the same document about how that feature works. And like I'd mentioned, that document is based upon the business objectives and the business challenges that the feature or the product in general was built to solve for. And so we have business objectives listed out, and then the generic solutions that we would advise, irrespective of the product that we're offering. And then we talk about the specific unique functionality, the key differentiator of our solution as it relates to the generic strategy. And I think that that is a very good way of organizing information around the product. It gets people to think about the business perspective of the customer or the prospect or the audience. And then it lets them become a consultant on what is the general way of solving this problem. And it then forces us to really think about, okay, there are a number of different solutions that might be out there for syndication of product data. What does our solution do That's really different. And that's where you see the crossroad happen with the product managers who have been working and researching and designing our feature functionality to have a unique differentiation. That's where the conversation really joins hands with the product management team. In addition to having that sequence, we also will include details around a competitive analysis. We'll include details about the ideal persona. We'll talk about why this feature was developed in relation to our overall business strategy, so that as you're reading this document, you also have context for how it fits into our overall business strategy. But the real core of that document and of that messaging is, what are the business challenges this solves? What are the general ways that you would solve this challenge? And then what is the specific thing that our features do that you can't get anywhere else?
It's great. It's useful to have a single source of truth for, because it's a cross-functional activity as well.
It's so important. Yeah. I mean, the single source of truth thing, I can't tell you how many hours I have saved myself and my team, because when somebody comes to us with something, we can just point them in one direction, the same direction every time. Hey, the document's already been written, and people love it. I mean, people come back to me later and say, thank you so much for writing that document. And they thank my team because they know that all the information that they need is right there. And then the message stays the same. I think one of the biggest things I've learned about marketing in general, whether you're selling software or a movie or a toy or a tractor trailer, is repeating the message. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's more a matter of getting that same message, the same wording out there in multiple forms: a podcast, a website, a flyer, a commercial. Anything that you want to do to reach your audience should always have, I think, the same basic message, so it starts to really settle in. Because as you and I both know, being product marketers, your audience doesn't hear you the first time or even the second time. They need to hear that message over and over again. So having a central document that can serve as that single source of truth really helps hammer that home with your marketing strategy.
Awesome. Great. So you mentioned that product management team will be part of the process.
Absolutely.
Who else would you bring into the process as well?
That's a great question. It depends on your organization and how your organization is structured. In general, I think that you want to have connections to all of the different aspects of your marketing team, whether you have a dedicated design team or you have a dedicated content team. Here at Salsify, we have a number of different teams that develop content. And so it's important that we work with each other in a really congruous way so that we are not overlapping, that we're not conflicting in our messaging, and that we're also using our own resources to bolster each other's messages. So we have regular brainstorm sessions where we talk about the types of topics we think are worth discussing to the market, and then how we can work together as teams and maybe develop a joint blog article or a webinar or a podcast or whatever other type of collateral we want to create, working with those different teams. As far as the other side of the business goes, you really do rely on your product managers to talk to you and represent the technical team. So I don't have a lot of contact with engineers or sales engineers or support people that are working on the technical side of our company. And on the sales side, I think it's important to have a good structured relationship with the sales team. I've worked in a lot of different organizations where you don't have a great handoff between marketing and sales. And as a result, a lot of the marketing collateral and a lot of the marketing research and work that goes into creating all of these materials and developing all these talk tracks can go to waste if you don't have a really good enablement team and you don't have solid connections between the marketing leaders and the sales leaders. Not at the top level. The C levels are usually pretty well synced, but it's that director level between sales and marketing that need to have good trust with each other, so that when new messaging comes out or a new deck comes out from the directors of the marketing team, that they're received by the managers of those sales teams and they really believe in them. And so to have that type of belief, I think you need to have collaboration. They need to be brought into the discussion. They need to feel a sense of partial ownership. But you can't make it an open forum for everybody on the sales team to give you feedback. You need to have representatives who will give you honest feedback about your message, and then also act as a cheerleader when that message is finally developed, so that the other members of the sales team trust that this is going to be a piece of collateral that is useful for them. And so that's my biggest piece of feedback for how you work with other teams inside of product marketing. Make sure you have good relationships with your sales representatives, but make sure they're the right representatives. They're people who will help collaborate in a way on your development of materials, and they're also going to evangelize for you so that this collateral that you're working so hard to create will also then be equally well adopted.
I see. This is great. So, after developing the new product messaging, who do you usually need to get buy-in from for the new messaging?
Yeah, when we're developing new messaging, we generally start with the product team. So the product team will come to us and say, we've got a new feature, and this is what the feature does. And that's great to hear. But we also definitely need to test things out with our customers. And so we will have conversations and we will do demo presentations around messaging with customers, trusted customers who we have great relationships with, who like being collaborative and like giving us some feedback. And what we're looking for when we have those conversations is a callback to the problem that the product team initially identified and built the solution for. If we're not connecting with the customers and the customer pain point, then it doesn't matter how many documents or how many single sources of truth you have or what they say, because you've missed the mark. And so we always like to test out this messaging with our customers. Then I always like to test things out with the executive level team and make sure that this is fitting to the way that our founders and our C-level suite wants to discuss our products in general. And then I'll bring in those sales representatives that I was talking about earlier. And I will say, hey, we vetted through this. We think this is going to be helpful for you. We'll take them through some basic enablement around the messaging and get their feedback. And after all of those parties have been informed, and the product team never goes away during all of this. They're usually very tightly coupled as we're developing things, but they're in more of a review, a consulting kind of role. And I'll just quickly say that a lot of times, if you're establishing a new product marketing functionality in the organization, or even if you're just a new product marketer, there's a level of earning trust with your product managers that I've almost always had to go through. And so product managers who, and especially if you're in a smaller company, aren't used to the type of support that a product marketer can provide, will usually want to do a lot of the development of the messaging. But because they sit at that product-centric perspective, their messaging is usually a little off. It won't connect with the customer as well as yours will as a product marketer. And that's why product marketing exists. But there is a time period that has to occur. And there is a level of trust that you have to build and earn with your product manager before they really trust you to do the development of the content. But it's well worth it to invest that time and bring them in as a collaborative partner so that they can see you as an asset and a resource and not as a competitor or an adversary, which I've seen happen sometimes. And so being voluntary and willing to take on the hard work of writing. I find that very rarely in companies are people willing to want to write for their company. There was an old Disney Imagineer that I used to work with. His name was Marty. And he used to talk about how the scariest thing in the world was a blank page. Everybody loves to edit. Nobody really likes to write. As a product marketer, you need to be willing to put pen to paper for the first time and then let other people tear it apart and give you their feedback and evolve it. And don't take ownership over it. It's not an identification of who you are personally. It's an identification of the message for an idea. And so having all this feedback and doing all of those rounds like I was talking about, if you do it properly, you will build trust, you will get some great feedback. The message will be better because of all of it, so that by the time you're ready to begin the enablement and working with your enablement team on getting this message out, you will have full confidence that you've talked to all the necessary parties and gotten their feedback to make the best message possible.
This is great. I really like your answer. That's a great answer. So, how often should one update their product messaging?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I think that the messaging needs to be updated as frequently as the product itself changes. You might make a huge feature release and you might have 3 of them inside of 3 months. Well, you're going to need to be updating that messaging if it is core to how you're talking about the product. At the very least, though, I would say you want to be updating your messaging once a year. I think about it a little bit like bridge painting. When a crew gets to the end of painting a bridge, they start again at the beginning. Our company message, our high level, if you talk to Salsify for the first time, the pitch that you're going to hear is a pitch that I work on almost year round. And so we end up re-enabling our team every January when we do our company kickoff and our sales kickoff. We introduce to them, this is the new messaging. This is what's changed in the market. This is what's changed about how we're positioning our product. And there can be a lot of components that change in the course of a year. but we are building and developing that message. Usually we start it at the end of the first quarter or the beginning of the second quarter. But again, at the very least, update your product messaging once a year. Things do change, but also update it as frequently as you need to, depending on what your product team is actually developing or how the market might change. In the last year, we've probably changed our high-level company messaging 3 times, not including the major pitch revisions that rolling out in January. So it really all depends on what your company is doing and what the market's doing.
I see. So when you have the new product messaging and the most recent products, and then when you interact with analysts talking about your product messaging, how do you usually work with them?
Another great question, Louise. We do have an analyst component to our team. So the way that Salsify is organized is we actually have a growth strategy team that the product marketing team sits underneath. And then there's a couple of other divisions within our growth strategy team. We have a competitive division that is focused on doing the competitive research around our products in the different markets where they're available. And then we have an evangelism team. And that's actually technically the team that I report into. That evangelism team is dedicated to promoting our company message out to the market at a high level, not necessarily at a sales specific level, but certainly focused on the product messaging. And within that evangelism team, we have analyst relations. And so we do meet regularly with analysts. It's a really important part of our product strategy and our marketing strategy so that the analysts can understand what we're doing. Analysts often will look to us as industry leaders about how to think of a PIM or how to think of syndication. And we also work with the analysts to understand from them what they're seeing in other parts of the market. There's only so much that you can do when you're on the outside looking in at what another company is working on. Analysts help us see general trends that are running across all of the major players in our industry. And they'll also give us insights about how the market is responding and how the market is changing. And so there's a very important symbiotic relationship there between us learning from the analysts and also the analysts learning from us. And we work with probably 5 or 6 different analysts on a regular basis. We do have formal relationships with key analyst firms in our industry, and they provide a ton of value to us, not just in learning, but also then in recognition for how great our product is. And when they evaluate our product, they give us some very honest feedback about where our product excels and where we need to continue to develop it.
Yeah, I see. Can you share some helpful tips for fellow product marketers on how to build meaningful relationship with analysts?
Yeah, I think that reaching out to analysts, I find that analysts are the cream of the crop when it comes to understanding. They're always very intelligent. They're very well spoken. They're like product marketers. In fact, I think product marketers would make good analysts because we spend so much time looking at the market, looking at competitors and developing messaging. And that's a lot of what analysts do, but they're just not tethered to a company that sells a solution, a specific technical solution for the market. And sometimes they actually are. But I would certainly recommend that you get in front of analysts, you talk about what your product can do, whether you can do it formally or informally. If you're lucky enough, you'll get some great feedback there. And in general, as a product marketer, I think a couple of the big things to be mindful of as you're doing your job is, one, don't take ownership. Don't personally associate your work with the feedback that your work receives. You are a developer, you are a creator, you are building something out of nothing. You're building a message out of nothing. And that message needs to get changed and it needs to move in directions that you wouldn't have initially thought of it moving. And it is going to suck the first time you develop that message. It will be a draft. Don't worry about changing it. Don't feel like it's a failure if you have to adjust the messaging. That is the process. So don't associate yourself and your sense of self with your work. It's really hard for a writer to do, but it's really important because it will then lower the bar for you to start writing. And I think oftentimes when I'm hesitant to write, it's because I feel like I need to get it perfect the first time. And that's just not the case. So be patient with yourself, be humble with yourself, take feedback, don't associate the feedback as a personal attack. And over time, you'll find that when you're done building out your message, it won't be a message that you recognize as your own because it will have had so much contribution coming in from other people and other sources, but it'll be the right message. It will be the message that resonates with the audience. If you go through everything that I talked about, I'm confident that you'll be able to build a message that's successful.
So when you're operating on a global scale, your product messaging probably need to tweak a little bit, adapt to the
100%.
local geographic difference. So what are the common challenges that you run into in the past?
Well, certainly translation is always a problem. I think that in our particular industry, where we are both selling to different regions of the world and we are supporting functionality for companies that need to be in different regions of the world, there's often confusion between translation versus localization. Localization for us is just the ability to support different languages. It's the translation, which is taking the message that you've created for your market and putting it into a language of the market that you're selling into, that is much more difficult to do, I think, from an operational perspective. We are lucky enough that we've begun to invest in product marketers who are specifically focused on taking our domestic company message and making sure that it resonates properly in markets abroad. And part of the challenge that happens there is that the values of your market will be different depending on where you're selling. And so the business challenges of your organization might be different. I'll give you a perfect example. GDPR and the nature of doing kind of direct selling, the nature of doing gifting, account-based marketing, which is very popular these days. It is received very, very differently in Europe because of the GDPR regulations than it is in the United States. So if you're building out messaging or if you're building out strategies that are based on account-based marketing, you might find that that's a strategy that won't apply at all when you start to sell internationally. And so you need to be mindful of the regulations of the countries that you're trying to move into. You need to be mindful of the values of the people who are working in these different countries. You need to be mindful of how they speak to each other. So not just the values, but the parlance. Are they a direct kind of culture, or are they more of a polite culture? That will change how your messaging will work. And then even the business challenges that the companies are trying to solve can be different in different markets. So when you are thinking about expanding internationally, it is much more than just having localization capabilities. And it's much more than just having things translated. You don't want to just do simple transliteration, or else you might end up using a word that is an inappropriate word to use in a certain market. I heard an issue with rendezvous once, where in France that has a very different meaning than it does here in America. And so be careful of just translating your message or just setting up a sales team in a different new territory and expecting them to be able to sell effectively with the materials that you've created for your domestic market. There is a lot more that goes into it all than just pure translation.
So do you have any final thoughts for our audience, for product marketers?
I would say write every day. That was a piece of advice that was given to me once by a writer. And it is a tool, it is a skill. And if you don't keep it honed, it will get rusty. So make sure that as you're doing your job, you are taking the time to write and be humble. Let it be something that evolves over time. Let other people contribute to it. Everyone loves to edit. No one likes to write. So if you're a writer and you're in this industry as a product marketer, you will find a home as long as you can make sure that your writing skills are as sharp as they can be.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your insights. This is great.
No problem, Louise. Feel free to have me back anytime. This was a lot of fun, and I hope it's valuable to your audience.
Thank you for tuning into This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. Check out our website, productmarketinghive.com, to join our community, meet fellow product marketers, and access free resources, including training, playbooks, templates, and events. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and give a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. See you next time.